Number 2, Monster Hunter Rise's Sandy Plains. When I make lists like these, I'm always hoping that I can get in some kind of a surprise sleeper pick just really high up on the list. I am certainly no contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian, but having a hot take and propping up an underdog can be pretty damn fun. I talked up the Wildspire Wastes a lot 2 entries ago, so how in the world does that map get beat out by a more standard issue desert biome that's a remake of a classic map? Because this is a masterfully done remake of an already phenomenal map that matches perfectly with the gameplay and seamlessness of the game it was remade for. And it has, in my opinion, the single greatest locale battle theme in mainline Monster Hunter. Let me explain. The biggest thing here is this particular map's status as a remake of the Sandy Plains from Monster Hunter Tri. A point or two for originality has to be docked for that fact. But I think that almost completely gets overturned by how good this map fits specifically within Monster Hunter Rise. A major issue that plagues the original desert maps of Monster Hunter is that the major desert battle zones were absolutely gigantic, placed right in the middle of things, and had loading zones at large distances away, and took a long time to cross sometimes. Now, the original Sandy Plains had a decent fix to this issue. It tucked the huge desert chunks away off to the left edge of the map so that they were less impactful on travel between the other zones. Monster Hunter Rise benefits from this layout and improves on things even further with the use of wire bugs and the palamutes. Now, we still have our big wide open desert battle zones that capture the feeling of facing an opponent out in these enormous wastelands, but all travel issues are axed completely. No bad placement, no terrible travel speed, nothing. Being able to run up walls and the seamlessness of the map also eliminates a ton of the loading zone issues that older desert maps could have to deal with. All the benefits, none of the drawbacks. Speaking of that seamlessness, it completely reinvents the system of caves that lie below the plains. In the original Sandy Plains, there's a series of caverns, sometimes used as battle zones and as nests. They're pretty lightly used in combat on the original map, though. In the Rise version, however, they are huge components of the map, super easily accessible, and look way cooler. There are lots of chasms and drop-offs scattered around Rise's Sandy Plains that you can leap off of to just go straight down to the bottom regions of the place. This simplicity of traversal means that they stepped out the amount of time that monsters will go down here considerably, and the fight variety of the Sandy Plains is all the better for it. In fact, battle zone usage gets benefited almost everywhere in this version of the Sandy Plains. The original version of the map is a gigantic locale that has some fairly uneven zone usage. I can remember fighting in zones 1 and 2 occasionally. The caves of 7 and 11 were utilized every once in a while. Zone 5 wasn't used for that much more than a nest. The Rise Sandy Plains distributes its monsters amongst the zones so well that it could add 2 more completely new battle arenas, and the place still entirely feels properly used. I said earlier that the caverns were used a hell of a lot more. Area 5 and 11 aren't just regulated to being nest zones anymore either. I love what they did with areas 1 and 2. They kept their higher elevation over much of the rest of the map and let a lot more monsters come up onto these elevated regions, which gives you this cool kind of scenic view to battle on, whilst the nature of Rise allows monsters to knock you off of cliffs, which I often find fun. I have had numerous fights up here where I caught myself being flung off of a ledge or used a wire bug to propel myself up and over gaps the monsters and I were fighting on. Area 3 is a brand new lower region that replaced some of the old scenic views that you could get from the elevated tops of Zone 1 in Tri's rendition of this map. It does suck a bit to lose some of the cool backdrops of this place, but the return for it is a solid box of an arena that is properly spaced but also sealed in on all sides by walls. It can make for a pretty good intimate battle zone that isn't oppressive but can be tough to run away from if you're getting caught up in there. And the brand new Area 5 is a much welcome new watering hole. This is undoubtedly created to give Almadron a second muddy swamp to go fight in. I enjoy these 2 additions a lot. They diversify the scenery of the Sandy Plains and battle zone structure of the place a decent bit, while filling in a couple of gaps that would exist from making the original Sandy Plains seamless. The art direction here is perfectly fine. The desert uses some good blends of tans, browns, and grays with a little bit of orange and yellow mixed in to color most of the map. I would have liked a little bit more saturation in the sand here, but that is an overarching issue with Rise itself, and the color blending here makes it so that the desert zones still look pretty good. They aren't just big, flat, tan circles. There's an appropriate amount of green scrub and small trees scattered around the place to saturate things with green a little bit more. It's nothing too overbearing, but it makes for some extra good detailing. The watering holes have a similar effect, adding a healthy amount of blue to the place, which makes me extra happy that we got a second zone like this now. There's some great lighting in the skybox as well. The sunset just floods the entire place with a nice bright orange, which I think looks excellent and makes the map as colorful as I like it to be the entire time. And the super clean Starry Night skybox is pretty gorgeous too. I do appreciate the extra spattering of ancient worn out ruins in this place that aren't nearly as present in the original version of this map as well. A lot of this is found in the areas between the battle zones. It gives the place a little bit more history as well as cool scenery. The best example of this is down in the caverns of Area 11. They created a few shelves of rock that ring around the more enclosed battle arena, and then built into the walls of the cave are several broken remains of brick buildings and a few old man-made passageways that you can explore. It grants this once incredibly underused battle zone a sort of underground coliseum or amphitheater type of feel to it, which is really sick. Some other zones I particularly enjoy here include the watering holes at Area 5 and 7. They add a nice change of scenery, some endemic life to use in battle, and a few large rocks to dodge around. The big desert zones 9 and 10 are nice and fun to fight in, as they provide a giant battlefield with minimal impediment and full range of movement for you and the monsters. The height and scenery make 1 and 2 feel pretty fun to fight on. 6 is a huge spacious hub zone that might often see multiple monsters enter the battle. Area 8 is kind of sick because it's got those 2 giant anthill towers that you can leap onto and swing off of and have monsters smash through. I like all of them. I don't think there is a single bad battle zone here. There's more impressive ones in this series with more verticality mechanics implemented, yeah, sure. But Rise is a game that declutters its zones to allow for more movement-intensive battles with the Palamutes and the Wirebugs. For what Rise is, these zones are pretty much unanimously great. There's nothing too small or too narrow or too cluttered. There's a good range of diverse zones despite the more uniform desert biome. You've got caves and deserts and watering holes and canyons and high-up cliffs and low-indented arenas, and it's a huge map that uses its entire enormous monster roster to make use of all of its space incredibly efficiently. Nothing on this map annoys me. There's nowhere here that I dislike going. I genuinely have an absolute blast when I hunt here. And the music, dude, it's so damn good. Like I said at the top, probably the best locale theme in mainline Monster Hunter. If we're counting Frontier, it's probably still top 10. Frontier's kind of unfair like that. Mercifully, this is not a remake of the originally Sandy Plains theme from Tri. The Flooded Forest and Jungle maps here that are also remakes did get their music completely remade, and those versions are woefully inferior compared to the original songs. And the original Sandy Plains piece was spared this fate. For some reason, the entire original track was just tossed out and replaced with this energetic, adventurous, grandiose track. It's not all that imposing or tension-filled or intense, it's just wicked fun. It keeps the percussion pretty fast and light. It has a beautiful arrangement of strings and horns with some flute acoustic strings mixed in there for a little bit of extra flavor. The star of the show is absolutely this female vocalist, though. She sounds phenomenal throughout the entire track with a lot of long, drawn-out notes that kind of adds this enchanting atmosphere to the piece. She's got a few segments in the song before the pace kind of slows down to feature the brass and the strings. Then they build back up into this incredible section where the whole orchestra, her included, get to kind of just go nuts. It's a blast to listen to. It's fantastical, has a kind of Arabian Nights feel that matches the desert aesthetic perfectly. It's got a great energy and pace to it. It's one of the most positive and upbeat battle tracks that Monster Hunter has to offer, which makes it just stand out to me even more. I think this map might be borderline flawless. It's a tad odd that something like a Basarios or a Kashaladora can be fought here. I think the map and Rise as a whole could have been benefited from some slight saturation bump, but like it's kind of it, and it's not the most unique thing in the world just because it can't be because it's a remake. I love all the battle zones. I adore the music. The monster roster is a ton of fun. It makes excellent use of its enormous size. Moving around isn't a hassle in the slightest. I don't have any complaints. I love being here. I love fighting here. Love just running around the place and exploring it. I think it's exceptional, and it's such a well-selected map for a remake that's incredibly well executed. The movement options and seamlessness of the zones that Rise provides were a net positive for some areas of the Sandy Plains that went underused or weren't as fun to trek through on that original map. It makes better use of the zones than the original map did and added 2 great new ones. Remaking the Sandy Plains for Monster Hunter Rise was a perfect decision. It fits this game beautifully and was almost exclusively additive to the original map. Only a few great backgrounds were sacrificed, which was a worthy price to pay for one of the most exhilarating hunting grounds ever constructed.